For more on Israel's ceasefire deal with Lebanon, we're joined now by Simon Frankel Pratt, lecturer of political science at the University of Melbourne. Dr. Pratt, good to have you back on the show. So this deal sounds exactly like UN Resolution 1701 circa 2006. So why should it work now when it didn't for 18 years?
So there are some mechanisms that have been included in this deal, or rather this agreement, that weren't in place originally in the implementation of 1701. One of the biggest is that the US is involved, that there are US guarantees that an international force will keep Hezbollah from returning to the border area. And Israel has been pushing hard for a US agreement to give Israel the right to act in its own self-defense in the area around the south. Another seems to be simply a stronger Israeli resolution to do exactly that, that Israel is more willing to engage in incursions, or as it would call it, self-defensive actions in the south of Lebanon should Hezbollah return. Whereas prior to this, during the implementation of 1701, Israel was really determined to avoid conflict at all costs and did not intervene when it saw Hezbollah rebuilding its infrastructure.
So, Doctor, what factors do you think pushed Israel to agree to this deal in Lebanon now? Was it the international pressure, military fatigue, or sort of diminishing returns in its battle with Hezbollah?
All of those are correct. I think that essentially Israel has achieved all of its core objectives. Its military operation in the south of Lebanon was very successful. Hezbollah has been dealt a severe wound. Almost all of its infrastructure in the south has been dismantled. The rocket barrages did not, materialize at the same scale that many in Israel had worried, even though they were there. And there's also a lot of fatigue, war fatigue. Israel's reservists and military forces are exhausted. They've been fighting in two fronts. This ceasefire, especially if it becomes permanent, gives those troops the opportunity to rest and recuperate, redeploy to the south. Also, Israel is using up its arsenals. There have been delays in U.S. resupplies of Israeli arms. And so even if it's only 60 days, and it very well might be, that gives Israel time to rebuild its arsenals and give troops some R&R before they deploy again.
President Biden, Dr. Pratt, convinced that this will lead to a permanent ceasefire. Are you equally convinced? Because we're already hearing conflicting reports about whether Israel can target renewed Hezbollah military activity in Lebanon. And we know also that Netanyahu's far-right partners and the mayors of Israel's northernmost communities are furious right now.
I am not at all confident that this ceasefire will even last 60 days, let alone become permanent. It's possible it will, definitely, and we should be so lucky. I think that there are a lot of other interests, incentives, and commitments that would need to be well managed and worked out in order for this to become permanent. And I would pay close attention to whether Israel's residents from the north who have been displaced for over a year, whether they begin to return home. Because if they return home, then the war is unlikely to resume. But so long as they remain displaced, that would sort of indicate that the security situation remains volatile.
And one reason that Netanyahu gave for agreeing to the ceasefire is that it will let Israel focus on the Iranian threat. I mean, is it clear what he means exactly by that? I mean, does it ease the pressure on Iran, or does it mean that, Israel is getting ready to confront Tehran directly?
I think that this might be a Netanyahuism. I think that a ceasefire in Lebanon would serve Iranian interests, right? Because Hezbollah is an extremely valuable Iranian proxy and ally, and if Hezbollah is given breathing space, the opportunity to begin its own long process of rearming and rebuilding, that will ultimately serve Iranian interests. So it isn't clear to me that this ceasefire actually allows Israel to focus on any particular Iranian threat. It does, however, give Israel the opportunity to declare victory in the north, which would be a relatively justified statement, I think, and focus its efforts elsewhere. And wouldn't it be nice if those efforts were directed towards a hostage deal and ceasefire in Gaza too?
That's my question, Dr. May. What would this mean for Gaza? Is this the beginning of a broader regional de-escalation or sort of a shift of focus to Gaza?
Well, as they say in the Middle East, inshallah, right? Wouldn't it? It's certainly possible that the precedent set by Israel declaring victory in its fight with Hezbollah, even if Hezbollah is not totally destroyed, that could be a similar precedent for declaring victory in its war against Hamas, even if Hamas isn't fully destroyed, and to begin the long phase of rebuilding and reconstructing Gaza. On the other hand, this might ease the pressure domestically on Netanyahu to, for example, draft the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredim, and this might allow him to continue the war for longer, as he clearly desires to do. So there are many different ways that this could go for Gaza. You can be an optimist about it or a pessimist about it, but prediction is difficult, I think.
And Dr., 60 days sort of coincides roughly with the lead up to U.S. President-elect Donald Trump taking office. If the ceasefire holds, what do you think will be Iran's next move? Will they continue to push their proxies, or a nuclear path becoming more of a priority?
Ultimately, I think this means that Gaza and Hamas stand alone. If Hezbollah withdraws from the fight, without a ceasefire in Gaza, which was its original condition, that certainly, maybe the Houthis will continue to fight, I don't know, but it really pulls other Iranian proxies out of the war and ultimately changes the regional geopolitical situation. And Iran is certainly nervous about what a Trump administration might mean. They're nervous that Trump might give Netanyahu the green light to hit Iranian nuclear facilities. There are lots of reasons why Iran wants to begin the new year very cautiously. And so I certainly think that the ceasefire like this, especially if it holds, indicates that Iran is kind of pulling out of the fray for the most part. I could be wrong about this.
All right, understood, Dr. Pratt. We leave it there. Thank you so much for your time. As always, a pleasure. Simon Frankel Pratt is a lecturer in political science at the University of Melbourne.